Are you ready to watch Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss battle it out to become the next Prime Minister? I know it's a very enticing prospect. Hopefully, some live reaction from myself and Aaron Bastani will make it more tolerable for all of you. We will be giving live reaction to what will unfortunately not be a head-to-head debate. That's how Sky initially promoted the event, but the candidates seem to have now resisted that option. I think they thought they were taking too many chunks out of each other and it was damaging the Tory party. So instead, there's going to be questions from a studio audience of Tory members and then from Kay Burley, one by one. Apparently Liz Truss is going first, then it's going to be Rishi. Of course, this comes on a massive day in British politics and the British economy and British society more generally. The Bank of England today announced that inflation is set to hit 13% and that we are set for 5 quarters of recessions. That means that a year and a quarter, we will have no growth in the economy. I think the economy is expected by the Bank of England to shrink by 1.5% next year. Do I have Aaron Bastani? I don't have Aaron Bastani yet. I will be joined by Aaron Bastani very shortly. So what to look out for in this debate? So if you've watched any Tizky Sours recently or been on Twitter and seen what YouGov are saying, this horse race is in a way over. You know, well, I don't, maybe the polling is completely wrong, but the polling is suggesting that Liz Truss has run away with this leadership race. She's on, double the support of Rishi Sunak, if you believe YouGov. I think Conservative Home are now saying a similar thing. So it looks that she is set to be the next Prime Minister. So what's relevant about today's debate? I'd say what's relevant about today's debate is the news today. It's the fact that we do have the worst economic outlook since 2008, and we have someone who is set to be the next Prime Minister, Liz Truss, and the person who is most responsible for Britain's economy over the past 2 years. Obviously, Rishi Sunak no longer Chancellor, but he's had a lot more impact on what will be happening over the next 6 months than Nadhim Zahawi has. Incidentally, Boris Johnson and Nadhim Zahawi, the Prime Minister and the Chancellor, are both on holiday, as it's announced it will have more than a year of recession. Let's go to the battle to number 10.
For number 10, the struggle for voters between Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak comes to a head tonight here at Sky News. For weeks, the candidates for Conservative leader have debated, but only now are the people who'll pick them finally getting the delayed chance to vote. The backdrop, a country predicted to be about to plunge into recession. It really is make or break. Tonight, we have more than 60 Conservative members and others in our audience, largely reflecting the demographic makeup of the party. Many of them are still undecided over who to back. In a format that's different and we hope perhaps more illuminating than other events, the two candidates will separately face questions from the audience and then face mine in an extended, in-depth interview. We tossed a coin before we came on air. Who won? Liz Truss won, and she chose to go first. She is with us now. Are you happy with the good evening? It's nice to see you. Thank you for joining us. It's great to see you. Are you happy with the format?
I'm very happy with the format.
Ready for the first question?
Yes, excited.
Here we go. Let's start with our first question, and that is Diana, who's here on the front row. Good evening, Diana. What's your question for Liz Truss?
My question for Liz is, the Bank of England have said that a recession is inevitable. What could you do to mitigate the impact of this?
Well, what the Bank of England have said today is, of course, extremely worrying. But it is not inevitable. We can change the outcome and we can make it more likely that the economy grows. And what's important is, first of all, that we need to help people struggling with the cost of living. I would immediately reverse the national insurance increase. I would also have a temporary moratorium on the green energy levy to save people money on fuel bills. But I'd also keep corporation tax low to make sure that we are attracting investment into our economy and doing all we can to avoid a recession, because I know what it's like when people lose their jobs, when towns and cities across our country struggle. I don't want our country to go through that. That's why it's so important we keep taxes low and we do all we can to grow the economy by taking advantage of our post-Brexit freedom, unleashing investment, changing things like the procurement rules and doing things differently. But now is the time to be bold, because if we don't act now, we are headed for very, very difficult times.
He was promising cuts to the public sector just earlier this week.
OK, anybody else got a follow-up on that one for us? Nobody at this stage.
Tory members are melts. That's good to hear. Thank you very much.
OK, well, I've got
That's the least convincing answer I've heard to that question.
Recession by the end of the year?
Well, what we know at the moment is a recession is predicted by the Bank of England. And what we need to make sure is we're using all the tools at our disposal, keeping taxes low, doing the reforms we need to our economy to get growth going faster, to encourage people to set up businesses, to encourage businesses to invest. And I want us to be on the side of people who work hard, people who do the right thing, people who support their families, people who set up businesses. And that's why it's so important we don't burden them with excess regulation, but that we also keep taxes low. Under the current proposals, our corporation tax would go up to the same level as France and 10 points ahead of Ireland. And I really worry about our capacity to attract that investment into our economy if we do that. Okay. You simply can't tax your way to growth.
G7, this is the least relevant thing to be promising right now.
The taxes we have at the moment, a 70-year high, are likely to lead to a recession.
Okay.
And that's what the Bank of England is predicting.
OK, Neha is here. Neha, good evening to you. What's your question for Ms Truss?
Hi, Liz. My question is, I'm amongst very few in my age group.
I can't hear you, Aaron. We're going to get that sorted out.
Members of the Conservative Party. I've been speaking to some of us, and we are afraid that the party has lost credibility. So my question is, how will you repair the damage to the party's reputation?
Well, the most important thing is we deliver on the promises we made. We got elected across the country in 2019. Because of our manifesto, we said we'd unleash opportunity, that we would grow the economy, that we would keep taxes low. So we need to deliver on all of those things. We need to deliver on the opportunities of Brexit. And when we promise something, we need to follow through on it. I think that's really important. But I also want the Conservative Party to be a party that reaches out to everybody across the country, gets new people on board, encourages people to join our party, because we've got some fantastically talented MPs, but we need a new generation of members. And I would appoint a really strong party chairman to encourage that to happen.
Any clues?
I have not. I am definitely, Kay, not being premature. We're still in the middle of a leadership race. And what I'm about is about talking to our party members about my policies.
So crazy that this is a discussion when we're being told we're going to have the longest recession since 2008. I think actually just as long as 2008. She's talking about who's going to be the Tory party chairman. The whole country is watching this, Liz.
What people really want us to do is deliver. And we've only got 2 years. It's not a long amount of time. And we need to get started straight away. So I want people from all parts of the party, from all parts of the country, who can really get on and deliver.
OK, politicians always say that our party is a broad church, and I always point out to them that people die in Broadchurch. I know. Let's bring it... I know.
That K is worse than the earlier
one. Unfortunately. People die in a broad church. Hopefully Aaron's going to get that so he can explain what that meant.
Hi. Good evening, Liz. I'm a medical consultant. I work in a hospital, and I see day in, day out the relentless pressure that our medical staff is having. Now, understaffing is a real issue at this moment in time. If you become the next Prime Minister, how will you solve this?
Well, first of all, the NHS has done a fantastic job in COVID, but we are facing a huge backlog. And that is putting huge pressure on.
Because you underfunded it for 12 years.
I make sure we're putting the recent funding we allocated, the 13 billion, into social care. Because there are many people who are in hospital who ought to be in social care, but there aren't the beds available. So I'd first of all make sure we're investing the money in social care. I'd also support our doctors and nurses more by removing some of the central diktats and also having fewer layers of management. On the campaign trail over the last few weeks,
give the junior doctors more than a 2% pay rise. That's what matters.
Layers of management above them, and I think that can be quite difficult and quite demotivating. And what we need is more of the empowerment, more of the decisions to be made by people on the front line. There are also a number of other issues we need to look at, like doctors' pensions. I've met a lot of doctors who've gone into retirement because of the specific issues around their pensions. I need to sort that out. And also, there are many doctors who very kindly came out of retirement to help during COVID. You know, help with the vaccination programme, help with the real issues we face in our hospitals. And what I'd like to do is see what we can do to encourage those people to come back into the profession and really help, because we do face serious issues. It is difficult to get a GP appointment. I represent a rural area. We've got real problems with ambulance waiting times as well. So We need all hands on deck. But
And that's
I
why
really
I'm going to cut
believe
corporation
that it's
tax.
by trusting people on the front line, trusting the professionals more, and making the organisation a really great place to work, that we will actually solve these problems together.
Want to come back on that?
I will say that I know that people that I work with will be really, really happy if you looked into pension tax, because a lot of people are going into early retirement.
Exactly.
So I'm sure that will help bring the waiting lists down and, help the road for recovery as well. So thank you.
Thank you. But we also need to listen to people like you who are actually involved in the health service and listen to your advice. Because what I've heard is lots of areas where we could use our facilities better. So, for example, I met a doctor who told me that he wanted to go in and work at the weekend, use the equipment of the weekend, but actually he'd been banned from more senior people in the organisation from doing that. So there are things like that I think we can empower people to do things differently and really treat this as a major national programme to deal with the aftermath of COVID.
Okay.
We were very successful at dealing with COVID, getting the vaccine, rolling out the vaccine, but now we have a major issue with the National Health Service, and we need all of the best brains working on it.
Just to clarify, are you suggesting that you should sack layers of
You should make me Prime Minister.
No, I'm not. What I'm suggesting is that we need to deploy people in the National Health Service better. And what I have heard is that there's been a lot of targets set
What I have heard. I heard on the grapevine, I want to be Prime Minister. What I've heard is that people want to go to work on Saturday and they haven't been able to.
Distance between the people making the decisions and the people actually on front line helping the patients.
Lots of people want to ask you questions, Ms. Truss. I think David from Guildford. David, where are you? Hand up, David. Where is he? There he is. He's just here. David, you've got a question on Ukraine, I believe.
I have. I thought it was going to Rishi, I must admit.
Oh, well.
But I'm perfectly
There we
happy.
are.
How would you propose to broker peace negotiations in Ukraine as opposed to continuing to provide arms to prolong the state of war?
Well, the only way this war will end is when the Russians leave Ukraine. And we need to make sure that we enable the Ukrainians to defeat Vladimir Putin. If there's any
start a nuclear war.
peace settlement, if there's any giveaway of Ukrainian territory, what we know from history is Russia will just come back for more. We saw that with the Minsk Accords, which didn't work. And we know what Vladimir Putin's plans are. He said that he wants to create a greater Russia, essentially the old Soviet Union, including the likes of the Baltic states. So that is why it's so important that we were the first European country to supply weapons to Ukraine. And we need to continue to do that. But we also need to work with our allies like the Americans, who are also putting weapons into Ukraine. We also need to toughen up the sanctions on Russia. Because at the moment, the way Putin is able to fund his appalling war machine is because of the oil and gas revenues that he's getting. And so that means us finding alternative sources, particularly in the UK. We have the North Sea, we can invest in more nuclear, but it also involves other countries finding alternative sources as well. Because what Putin has done is he's used Europe's dependence on Russian gas to hold the whole continent to ransom. And that is appalling. And we know the end result.
Do we know how he's held the continent to ransom in the sense... I mean, we're still arming Ukraine, I suppose, because we haven't stopped buying their gas, is what she's saying, or the Germans haven't especially.
It's really appalling how Putin made the Germans give up nuclear energy.
Now, of course, President Zelensky, ultimately is the person who has to determine what an eventual peace deal would look like. And he has been very clear that Russia needs to leave the entirety of the Ukrainian territory.
He won an election based on backing the Minsk Accords.
The United Kingdom, or indeed any other country, to say Ukraine should give up part of their territory. That would be very wrong. And what I worry is the lesson it would give to aggressors around the world if Russia was seen by saber-rattling, by lining up troops on the border, lining up tanks
This is
on the
mad,
border.
Michael. Can you hear me now?
Gaining a piece
I can hear you now, yep.
Ukrainian territory. Sure. What message would that send to others around
We're
the
looking
world?
at 17% RPI inflation by the end of this year, and there's still not political realism
I just wondered if you didn't
from the
mention
political elite.
anything, about
There isn't.
attempting to negotiate or
Obviously, the
broker
war needs
some
to
peace
end.
deal.
We
Obviously.
have been involved in working on negotiations with our American, French and German colleagues, and we are providing support to the Ukrainians to do just that. But it is ultimately about what the Ukrainians are willing to negotiate. What I don't want to see is Ukraine be put under any pressure to give up
She's setting
territory
preconditions, which is that Russia has to leave every part of Ukraine, which includes Crimea, which no one thinks is going to happen.
Because all we'll see
And also,
is Russia retreat.
the indications are that Crimeans don't want that. I know, again, it's not something said in the British media, but it's again, it's like you say, Michael, it's an unrealistic demand.
Kiev, not a long-term retreat, and we need to be very, very worried about Putin's intentions. It's one of the reasons, by the way, that I favour raising our defence spending to 3% of GDP over the next decade.
Still got lots of questions to get through.
Sorry.
So if I may, no, not at all. I want to bring in our next question, which is about housing, and it's from Jude from Chippenham.
Michael, we're looking at 17% RPI this year. We just skirted past that, didn't we? Like it wasn't a big deal.
It was 3 minutes, yeah.
Will be moving to London to start a new job as a commercial lawyer.
Can you imagine if it was a Labour government?
I thought, perhaps naively, that it would make sense to buy somewhere in London rather than rent.
Tory party members!
Deposit on a starter home. How will you solve the housing crisis and make it easier for young people to own their own home?
Jude, I think
London,
it's incredibly
they ain't going to do it, pal.
that we help more people get on the housing
Dude is like
ladder.
22 and he wants
It
to
is
move
a
to London and buy a
problem
house straight
that
away
this generation of
with an
young
entry-level
people
job.
Can I have a deposit
end
of
up buying houses
Can I have a
much
deposit of
later in their
£100,000,
lives
please? Thank you.
previous generations. But the way to do it
fuck is this
not
guy?
the system we have at the moment, which is Soviet-style top-down housing targets,
Oh, fuck
which
off.
simply cause huge
Soviet.
concern and don't actually deliver the results we want.
We have a free
And
market system which puts all
before
power
I
with
became
the
an MP, I
landlords
was
and
a
then
councillor.
radically
I
inflates
sat on a
prices. The
planning
problem isn't
committee. It was
communism,
hours
Liz.
of my life I'll never get back because we didn't have any control over what happened. Everything got overruled by the planning inspectorate in Bristol. So what I want is a much more localised system of planning. So in
We have an
London, for
incredibly
example, I
localised
think there's
system of
more
planning
opportunity
whereby
to
people can
build
object
up,
to any buildings in their
London,
neighbourhood, which is
to
why we
build
don't,
more,
well, one of the reasons, there are many
higher
reasons, but
storey
one of the reasons why we don't have enough
buildings. I
houses.
think in other parts of the country, what we need is more investment zones where we have industry developed alongside homes, alongside infrastructure, and that can be determined
London?
by
He's asking
local
about
people.
London.
But the one-size-fits-all planning system we have at the moment simply doesn't work.
Yeah.
The other
Nod.
thing I do to help
Nod
you
and keep on renting.
specifically is when somebody does rent, they should be able to use their rental history towards getting a mortgage for their home. And that will help people who are long-term renters get onto the housing ladder.
OK, just want to share this quote with you that you, I think
If
it
they
was
have a 70
3
grand
years
deposit.
ago, perhaps a little bit longer. We need to build 1 million homes on the London Green Belt, near railway stations and around other growing cities, specifically to allow the under 40s
I agree
to
with
be able
Liz
to
in
own their own
2019.
homes. Do you still want to build 1 million homes on Green Belt and the like?
So what I don't want to do, Kay, is build it on the green belt. Because
Changed
I
your
do
mind?
think, well, I've changed my view on that.
I've changed my
I'm still
mind,
very
actually.
keen for the under
3 years
40s to
ago.
be able to own their own
I've been on a
homes.
journey.
But what I've seen is that the way these top-down targets have resulted in having the opposite effect of getting the homes built. And I'm
No
now
one
of the
thinks
view
this is
that what we need to do
how
is
to
have
solve the housing crisis. This is just reassuring
get
Tory
local
party members who
councils
own their
to
homes, who don't
set
want
up
new people to live in their
investment zones
areas,
and do
and
things differently,
putting in
because
the
the current
language
system
of I'll
isn't
increase
working.
housing
OK,
supply
so
in this
you changed
country.
your mind on that one. Jill from
The problem
Tunbridge
is
Wells.
targets, Michael.
Are you angry,
Too many
Jill?
targets.
Just a bit. Well, disgusted. Hi, Liz.
Hi.
How important is it to balance the books?
So the answer is, it is important over the long term to make sure
The
that
one
the
thing I
private
agree with Liz
sector
Truss
is
on.
growing faster than the public sector, and we are able to
okay,
generate
no,
the
not necessarily.
revenues for our economy and also be able to pay for our public services. But it isn't right to try and balance the books straight away when we've had a major global crisis like COVID, and every single country in the world has built up debts from that crisis. And in fact, we have
I'm with
lower
Liz.
levels of debt
I'm
than
with
most of the
Liz, yeah,
G7
hashtag I'm with
countries. So I
Liz.
think
On
trying
this-
to balance the books prematurely is actually counterproductive, because if you put up taxes and you stop businesses forming, you stop new investment, and you
Starmer
stop
isn't brave
economic
enough to make this
growth,
argument.
you're less likely to be able to pay down the
True.
debt over the
He's
longer
to the left
term.
of Starmer on this.
Happy with that?
No.
Doesn't look as though you
No,
are.
not
So
at
what's
all.
your follow-up question on that one?
Liz, I do not want to see my children and my grandchildren encumbered with huge debt at a time of rising interest rates.
The debt we have is from student fees. The debt we have is from the extortionate rents we have to pay. It's not because of some government debt down the line, which is going to go away with inflation anyway.
This is not sound economics. And the whole business about economic
Instead of
growth,
imagining what they're saying
tax cuts do not necessarily produce economic growth. If you look at Germany, for example, it has much higher corporation tax than we have. And indeed, even with the rise...
She's a very confused lady, this one. She's saying some good things, some bad things.
Their economy is not tanking in the way that ours is tanking. So I think this question of balancing the books is really fundamental.
Sound bites or sound economics?
Well, we have lower levels of debt than countries like the US, Canada and Japan. So it's simply not true to say that we have particularly high national debt at the moment. But what I do know is that families across the country are struggling to pay their bills. And what I would do is help relieve...
15% interest rates, Liz. I remember those days. I had to pay a mortgage of 15%. Are we going back to that level again?
No, because we've got an independent bank
interest rate's 1.75%.
that make decisions about interest rates, and we're nowhere near that position at all.
That's what she's saying as well.
To say,
I mean, even with 15% interest rate, she's probably still made a profit on her house because of how much they've gone up in the past 50 years.
70 years, and we think there'll be no consequences for economic growth. I'm afraid
interest rates are at 1/10 of what she's saying. You know, it seems a bit strange.
Who are very concerned about the proposals to raise corporation tax. They're very concerned about the level of interest rates. They're very concerned about the regulations on their businesses at the moment. The fact is that Britain has got less competitive.
Even businesses don't seem to be worried about increases
under these corporation tax proposals. We would have corporation tax that is 10 points higher than Ireland, and it will make us less competitive.
And Germany?
Since when is Ireland the comparison? It's so weird.
Germany has a very, very different economic system from the UK.
Because they invest in stuff,
yes. Time for one more question. Tom from Gateshead. Where's Tom? We'll come back to other questions. Tom, hi, sorry.
Hi, thanks very much. Liz, why did you announce a well-researched and fully costed policy in which you openly said you valued the work of teachers, nurses and police officers in Newcastle, where I work, less than you value those in Guildford, for example? We're having this election because of poor judgment and trust. Why should we trust your judgment?
Well, the reason
Strongest question so far.
I immediately decided not to pursue that policy is it was being misinterpreted, in fact, in exactly the way you said, because it wasn't about teachers or nurses or doctors. And immediately, as there were concerns expressed about this policy, I said we're not going ahead with it. And I do think in politics,
it was just those nasty civil servants.
When you have to make judgments about what is right, and you have to be honest with the public. And I was very honest about the situation. It wasn't a core part of my policy plank, but I'd rather
It wasn't honest. She said it was misinterpreted.
And if there's a problem,
the only way to make the numbers add up was if she wanted to cut everyone's wages or every public
and
sector
I think
worker's
you
wages.
can see in my time as Foreign Secretary, in my time as Trade Secretary, I've been completely upfront about everything I've done. I've explained why I've done it. I've explained
She's a good bullshitter.
when there is a change, why there is a change.
She's walked back a real humiliation.
Prime Minister.
Relatively effectively.
The press release didn't say that. It said that it would be, in order to reach the 8.8 billion in savings, that it would be expanded out beyond civil service, beyond the civil service itself. So that's a mistake. Will you apologise? Because it was actually quite offensive.
Well, I have been very clear that I will not go ahead with this policy and that I have made a decision to do that straight away. And I've been upfront about that. I don't think there is anything to be ashamed of saying publicly that this is not working as I wanted it to work, and therefore I have changed the position
not
on
working.
it, and I'm not going ahead with it.
Okay,
it hasn't gone down how you wanted it to go down.
So can we just
It wasn't my position and it's not working.
Thank you. You were shaking your head, sir.
I did, yeah. I hate this apologise, for everything that you might have said. I just don't understand it. The opposition are always asking other politicians to apologise for what they may
Leave Liz Truss alone.
Have done. And it really doesn't.
I agree with him. I don't care. Just don't. The policy is really destructive. Don't do it. But will she apologise? Oh God.
My point was, you shouldn't have done.
We are going into very, very difficult times as a country. Yeah. And we've just talked about that. And we need somebody leading this country who is prepared to make decisions, who is prepared to deal with issues as they arise, and is prepared to be upfront with the public. And I think I've demonstrated that.
The questions are really good, Michael.
In all of the jobs I've held during this campaign.
Really good audience.
I'll come back to you, madam, if I may.
Well, apart from that lady
Miss Truss, it's time
talking about balancing the books.
for my go. Everybody
The dude who wanted to buy a house in London at the age of 22.
I wanted to pick up, actually, just where we'd left off there.
Here we go. It all falls apart here, Michael.
You, about on this press release. We just want to bottom it out so we know exactly where we are. You said that public sector pay policy has been misrepresented by the media. Here's the proposal that you released. Introduce regional pay boards, tailoring pay to the cost of living where civil servants actually work, saving up to £8.8 billion per year. So how have we misrepresented you so far?
Well, what I am clear about
defending itself, though.
is that policy was not.
How is this more important than a 17% RPI? How?
I'm not going ahead with this policy.
You can, but you said you were misrepresented. I'm just clarifying.
Because of the concerns that have been expressed.
It's a dumb policy. She junked it. I want to know about 17% inflation.
I deal with it.
OK, but just to clarify whether you were misrepresented or not, you highlighted a very specific saving, £8.8 billion. How did you reach that figure?
Well, I don't have the details, and I do think discussing a policy that I'm not progressing with...
Well, I can tell you, obviously these people, it's very pressing for these people, certainly some of them, so we just want to bottom it out and then we're definitely go, and I'm sure you won't have to answer
more pressing than 17% inflation.
It's exactly the same figure, the £8.8 billion, that was issued by the Taxpayers Alliance. They say regional-based pay could allow private sector salaries to catch up with the public sector. This can be done by freezing or reducing pay for existing roles and new positions.
Fair enough to hammer on
In other words, pay cut for nurses, doctors, firemen, police officers in less
Michael,
areas, which is what
we're going through the biggest economic downturn.
That wasn't
I mean, it's going to be as bad as 2008, and we had 3 minutes on it.
But given the concern that was caused, I took an immediate decision not to proceed with this policy.
OK.
And I am somebody who immediately... If there
could
are
move on if
issues
she was
of
just
concern,
straight, though, right?
those
I didn't understand the policy.
Not delivering what I want to deliver, I will make a decision to do the right thing, and that's what I've done.
Not just this gentleman here, but Ben Houchen, the Conservative Mayor of Tees Valley, said there's no way you can do this without a massive pay cut for 5.5 million people, including nurses, police officers.
We're going to have 15 minutes of this
outside of London.
And the favourite to be the next PM isn't going to be asked about 17% inflation. This is everything wrong with the media, Michael. I'm sorry.
I do accept that the way the policy has
been interpreted, it's a big story, but not fucking 15 minutes.
Was not right. And that's why I took an immediate decision not to go ahead with it.
You offended people, though. You misread the mood. You accept that it was a mistake.
What I've said is I absolutely accept that it wasn't the right policy to deal with this situation, and therefore I withdrew the policy immediately. And I'm somebody who is honest and upfront, Kay. I dealt with the issue immediately after the concerns were expressed about how this policy had been interpreted, and I've dealt with it straight away.
OK, it was a mistake, though.
Well, as I've said, I've withdrawn the policy. We're not going ahead with the policy. So therefore,
Right, I'm with you now, Aaron. Let's move on.
The points you're making are about a policy that isn't
She'll stick with it, because this is the media talking point.
Own their mistakes.
Here we go.
Or should they blame others?
I'm not blaming anybody else. I'm saying that
if you have £100 in your pocket,
has been misrepresented
in a year's time, it could be 17% less valuable.
I don't want
but
that's
not as important as the fact Liz Truss won't apologise over a policy that won't happen.
Which isn't a core part of my policy platform, and I'm not going ahead with it.
OK, let's talk about the economy, as we've moved on to that. I want to talk to you about your plans to help the worst off, if I may. We've spoken to Selina. She's a single mum in the northeast of England. She works part-time to support her 3 children and earns just over £10,000 a year. What will you do to help her when her energy bills reach £500 a month in January?
So first of all, I'll take immediate action to reverse the national insurance rise. And
won't help her. She earns less than 12,000.
She's on 10k. That's why it's a good question.
So she won't benefit.
Also, the green energy levy will be taken off.
Very good question.
That's about 130 quid.
So that's a drop in the bucket, really, isn't it?
And what I will also
something like 9 days of energy for her.
And what I will also do
fair play,
is
Kay
work
Burley.
to increase the amount of supplies we're getting out of the North Sea, so that we can get more gas into our
Fucking
system,
North Sea.
so we can move
What?
forward on dealing with the energy crisis and energy security.
I'll go there and
Because
pump it myself.
Ultimately, these problems can only be dealt with by, first of all, making sure Putin is defeated by the Ukrainians, so
That's not
that
gonna happen
we
this
don't
winter,
have this
Liz.
energy supply problem. And
We're gonna make
also,
sure-
This is a really bad
by
answer.
releasing more reserves in the North Sea.
Fuck me, it's
I'm
a
also
very
in
bad
favour of
answer.
fracking
There's a few-
in areas that
She was-
support it, so we get more of our own domestic energy supply. But what
Okay,
I can
that's a big
assure
vote
you,
winner
Kay,
amongst the Tory base,
is I will
fracking.
do all I can to help people who are struggling with the cost of living. I understand that people are going through
He has
difficult
no plan for
times,
that person,
and if
you know,
there
who
are
was
any
fairly
more
representative of
available
lots of people.
resources, of course,
Nothing
I would
for
put
them.
that to
150
helping
quid Green
people
Levy.
with the cost of living.
Let me tell you
So
what Selina
the-
said,
the-
if I
the-
may. These are Selina's words. I'm really worried about how I'm going to keep my children warm and fed. This is going to cost lives if they don't do something now.
But this is why it's so very important that we offer support to businesses, that we...
It's not going to help her.
Well, it will help her
How?
because the real danger we're in as a country, and this is what the Bank of England has said today, is we're facing a recession. And what a recession would mean is people losing their jobs.
Her danger is she can't heat her house. She's got a job, she gets 10k a year.
So that's why it's so important we do things like keeping corporation tax low, keeping personal taxes as low as possible.
We're keeping corporation
getting
tax
things like
today, and we're getting
infrastructure projects done quicker.
5
to grow
quarters
the
of economic
economy.
contraction.
That is ultimately the way we are going to deal with this crisis, is through economic growth.
This is the weakest she's looked
Here's
in the
an
whole
idea. What
campaign
about the
so
windfall
far.
Yeah.
tax? Shell posted
Growth
she can say
solution.
is
How will you grow the
tax
economy?
£3 billion
Nothing.
between April and June. If we put that another way, Shell made £1,190 per second. So since I started this sentence, they've made £17,000 in profit. Why don't we have another windfall tax?
Well, the problem with a windfall tax is that it might secure money in the short term. But what it does is it puts off companies investing in Britain in the long term because they
BP
think
said they wouldn't,
they
didn't they?
think at any point they could be taxed. And I think that is a problem.
You think
What
people
we
are going
need
to
show is
stop
Britain's
selling
open for
energy to
business.
people in Britain?
We're a country that
No, it's-
keeps to our word of what our taxes
it's
are.
bananas.
And windfall taxes are essentially surprise taxes.
BP
that companies
shareholders, Michael, just got dividends of £4 billion. £4 billion.
is make sure
But they're going to say, you know what?
incentivising
We don't
the
like this
likes of
industry
Shell
anymore because
to
you just
be
raised taxes. We
releasing
only got
resources
£4 billion in
from the North
dividends this
Sea
quarter.
to actually help the problem that we face, which is a lack of energy supply.
The head of
She's
BP
so
said
bad.
that his business would continue to invest if there was another windfall tax.
It's not just BP, though. It's the
head of
signal that it
BP is
sends
wrong.
to every business across the country that the government is willing to give you a surprise tax. And I think that is a problem for Britain. I've already talked about how our...
It was a surprise
corporation
windfall,
tax
that's the
rate
point. They
is
didn't know that
uncompetitive compared
Russia was
other
going to invade
countries.
Ukraine.
If we also have
Surprise
a
windfall,
reputation
surprise
for
tax.
having a surprise tax on any industry that makes a profit, that is a big problem for our country.
Shell is giving their shareholders £6.5 billion. People at home watching who can't afford to heat their homes come the winter will be horrified at that.
But look at who these shareholders are. These shareholders are often people with pensions, pension funds. The shareholders
Tiny
are not
proportion of pension
all
funds.
sort of men in suits sitting in offices.
Yes.
There is a real...
Yes, that's exactly
there's no
who
such
they
thing as
are.
free money. And I just
So
think
you
we've got to
think
be
it's
very
right that that woman who gets 10
careful.
grand a
The
year
UK
is
gets
paying
reputation
a grand for
arbitrarily
relatively
taking
very,
money
very
in
wealthy
tax, and
people
we've
who own
not
shares in Shell,
sort of done
essentially?
through the official tax system? I think that's a problem.
OK, let's move on to foreign affairs. We've talked about it a little bit. Do you want a sip of water?
Yeah.
You're very welcome.
She should have stayed on that
Talking
longer.
about Taiwan, I'm sure that
That's
we've
a
all
week as
seen,
she's
haven't we,
looked.
what's been happening in Taiwan over the last few days. As Foreign Secretary, you told a select committee last month that we should have armed Ukraine earlier. Should we arm Taiwan now?
Oh, God.
Well, what we do need to make sure is that democracies like Taiwan are defended. And yesterday I put out a statement with my fellow G7 foreign ministers about the very difficult situation in Taiwan and concern about the rhetoric that we're hearing from China, the escalatory rhetoric. Of course, we have a very secure control system for exports in the United Kingdom, and we do licence exports to Taiwan at the moment, exports that are provided by the private sector.
So should we arm them or not?
Well, what I'm saying is we already licence equipment to go to Taiwan.
Okay.
And it's a long-standing policy of the UK government to do that.
Okay, you said to the Foreign Affairs Select Committee in June, month before last, we should have done things earlier. We should have been supplying the defensive weapons into Ukraine earlier. We need to learn that lesson for Taiwan. Every piece of equipment we have sent takes months of a training. So the sooner we do that, the better. So just to clarify, we do license arms that go there, but that is as far as we're going to go at this stage.
Yes. That is as far as we will go at this stage, but we are working with our allies very closely on this.
Stupid line of questioning.
Countries like the United States, Japan, who also are extremely concerned about the future of Taiwan.
Okay.
And what we need to do is work collectively.
Enough people are arming Taiwan. It's a pretty different situation to Ukraine.
The G7 acting together as an economic
totally
NATO
different.
to
It's like one of the most
challenge some of
high-tech,
China's economic
industrialised
coercion
economies in the world.
practices, but also to make sure we're looking at the security situation and making sure
she was falling apart in the
like Taiwan
economy, and now we're talking about bloody Taiwan.
Understand, Kay, that I can't go into every detail of those conversations
because I want
on TV.
Sure.
But it's a very important principle that we do not allow aggressors to invade democratic places.
We've seen Nancy Pelosi, another strong, influential woman in Taiwan this week. Will you visit Taiwan if you're Prime Minister?
We currently have a long-standing...
So yes or no question, really?
No.
Good question, to be fair.
We have a long-standing position that the Foreign Secretary...
Well, Kay Burley is making Liz Truss look sensible on foreign policy, which is a real feat.
To you about Ukraine. Was it an error of judgment to say you'd support Brits going to fight in Ukraine?
What I was very clear about...
Well, realistically, we don't go there unless the Yanks ask us to.
That's the fight in Ukraine, but I've always been clear that
also, I mean, we don't want to piss off China. I mean, we still have very strong relations with them, however angry she's going to sound in her rhetoric.
No, I know, but we have no independent foreign policy on Taiwan. It's US foreign policy, and we follow it.
Well, what I supported...
You had to be corrected by your own defence secretary.
What I was saying is that I supported the cause in Ukraine.
OK. Your Foreign Office website said Brits travelling to fight in Ukraine could be committing an act of terrorism. Did you know that when you said it?
Well, what I've said is that I support the cause in Ukraine.
Jihad is, Liz.
Work to support British citizens who have been detained in Ukraine, who've been there in the long term, and the Foreign Office has provided...
Show the clip of her saying that she's...
misinterpreted what you were saying.
Well, what I have said is that the advice was very clear, the travel advice was very clear, and I announced that publicly, that people shouldn't go to Ukraine. But I think what is happening...
It wasn't very clear, because we spoke to people in Poland who were going into Ukraine, who were Brits that had crossed the border and were then subsequently going into Ukraine.
Well, there have been many British people going into Ukraine.
Surely it wasn't, because Liz Truss told them to on Sky News.
Clear about our travel advice.
OK, I've got some quick fire questions for you, if I may. Here we go. In your first meeting with the Queen, will you apologise for wanting to abolish the monarchy?
Well, I've already met the Queen, and she's been far too polite to raise that issue with me, and I will not be raising it with her.
OK, but if she did, would you apologise?
Well, I was wrong. I was wrong to say what I did at the time.
OK. Will you be apologising to the First Minister of Scotland when you see her?
No, I won't.
What's the naughtiest thing you've ever done?
I'm certainly not going to say that on TV.
Oh, was it that naughty?
Announced that I would cut the wages of all teachers and nurses in the north of England and then retract the following day.
Yeah. Being Prime Minister is the most invasive, exposed period in any politician's life. Is there anything...
Unless you're Jeremy Corbyn, in which case it's Leader of the Opposition.
...with the audience here in the studio and at home...
Because there's no one else listening, so it's all fine, I can just tell.
Anything that you need to get off your chest?
I can tell you, Kay, there are no skeletons in my closet. I think everything I've ever said and done is known about very publicly.
Would you remove the whip from Boris Johnson if he's found to have deliberately misled Parliament over Partygate?
I'm not making any prejudgments about that.
Why not?
Well, I'm not making prejudgments. I'll see what the committee says.
But if they say deliberately misled Parliament?
As I say, I'm not making any prejudgments about that.
What one changed?
By the way, I'm very clear he didn't mislead Parliament.
Well, we'll see what the what the committee says. What one change to the system would you make to restore integrity? Because there's a lot of people here in the studio.
You should have just given Liz Truss a 20-minute grilling on the economy. It would have been way more informative than this.
You know, integrity has been lost in the Westminster bubble. What would you do to change it?
Well, I think
when inflation is
the answer to
17%,
restoring
nobody cares about
isn't
integrity.
Introducing more rules, because we have endless rules and codes. The issue is about clarity and leadership and doing what you say you will do and following through on your promises. What I would also do as Prime Minister is restore the Chief Whip to number 12 Downing Street. The Chief Whip was moved out by Alistair Campbell.
Who cares? Oh my God.
I think that was a mistake because it reduced the link
No,
between
this
the
is
Prime Minister, the Chief Whip and the
It's a
parliamentary party.
it's a dopey talking point which all of a sudden the media becomes obsessed with. Oh yeah, you know, it's like, this is flooding the zone with shit.
Bad behaviour.
This is flooding the zone with shit.
But we're also
This is
supporting
smart
MPs,
politics
because as
from
you
a
say,
Bannonite perspective.
Being Prime Minister is an exposed job, but
It's a
actually
dopey talking
being an
point.
MP at the moment is pretty difficult. You know, there's all kinds of difficult things said about you on social media.
I mean, it's not Liz Truss's problem, it's Kay Burley's problem. It's like, it's moving the conversation onto a completely irrelevant issue. Where's the Chief Whip going to be based?
And, you know, making sure people are honest and...
I mean, I didn't even know there was a number 12 Downing Street until just now, Michael. There you go.
And a new ethics advisor.
I didn't.
And you stand by if you would. A new ethics advisor.
Well, I will look at the role of the ethics advisor.
No one is going to care about this over the next 12 months.
I'm somebody who does act with integrity, and I think people have seen that in every job I've done. And I slightly worry about outsourcing ethics to somebody else. As Prime Minister, I should know the difference between
what this all ignores is that
right and wrong. And of course,
the integrity story was so specific to Boris Johnson and so specific to the lockdown, and Kay Burley's sort of just imagining that that story is going to continue. But it was because coronavirus meant that rules really, really mattered, and because you had Boris Johnson who systematically broke rules. With, as you say, inflation, the RPI at 17%, and more than a year of recession, no one is going to care about the ethics advisor and where the Chief Whip is based.
Shoulder to shoulder.
I just don't want to get poorer, right? I'm the not get poorer party.
I don't agree with that characterisation, Kay. I supported Boris Johnson for the leadership. I think he did a good job as our Prime Minister. He delivered Brexit. He delivered the vaccines. He also did a fantastic job of leading the free world in standing up to Vladimir Putin in Ukraine. Yes, he made mistakes. That's absolutely true. You know, he said sorry for the mistakes he made, but I think it's completely wrong to characterise him in that way.
I don't know. What does the audience think?
Hear, hear.
Yeah, agreed. No. OK.
So, I think it's opinion. Opinion is divided on that issue. I think we can hear from people in the audience. But I have worked closely with Boris Johnson. I know the difficult times he went to. You know, he was in very serious trouble when he had COVID. And, you know, it's been a very, very difficult time to be in government. But look, you know, many mistakes were made during lockdown, Kay, you know, by many people.
Including by Kay Burley, by the way.
Sort of say that
That's true. I suppose that's why she said that.
The problem is not right.
Yeah, some in charge of policy, some not. A final question for you just before
that was her comeback.
You were a Remainer, and now you're not. You supported Brits to fight in Ukraine, then you didn't. You wanted to build on the Green Belt, and now you don't. You wanted to abolish the monarchy, and now you don't. You wanted to arm Taiwan, and now I'm not sure if you're saying whether you do or not. You wanted civil servants...
We do provide them with those.
Her answer was actually fairly clear on that.
You wanted to cut civil servants' pay in the regions, and then you said you didn't. Will the real Liz Truss please stand up?
OK, I'm somebody who, you know, I didn't come from a traditional Conservative background. My first political experience was going on a CND march with my mother, age 7. You know, I then, as a teenager, joined the Liberal Democrats. I'm not sure how much I should be held to account for things I said when I was 18 or 19. But I've always had a belief that we can be a more successful country, that people should be able to control their own lives. I've always believed in the principle of freedom.
When people are facing free grand energy bills, what I'll do is offer them £150 off and cut taxes for corporations. That's what I've always, that's what I believe now. That's my integrity for you.
Who has the same views at 19 and 49. And I'll show you somebody who's not capable of original thought. So yes, you know, I have, you know, developed my views. I've considered things differently. And I also listen to people.
Okay.
And I think that's important.
Okay.
So what we've been talking about
we're
today
out of time. We have to
on
give,
the policy is I've listened
Rishi
to
the
people.
same amount of time. I did say, will the real Liz Truss please stand up? You're still sitting down.
That's just because you're trying to get rid of me, Ken.
Please do.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Bear with us 1 second. Bear with us 1
So
second.
presumably now we've got a little break before Rishi Sunak comes
Over here,
out.
I heard who was shouting out. Gentleman here. Yep, boom. There, sir. Go on.
I was going to say, Liz mentioned about nothing in her closet. She'd mentioned about integrity. Does that mean at some point in the future, if she's proved to have lied about something, she's going to resign?
I don't know. What do you think?
That's why I wanted to ask her.
Who else has got a question? The lady here had her hand up earlier. Yes, madam.
I was just wanting to ask if she actually believed that.
Why is
Boris
Kay Burley
Johnson's
asking people what they would have
actions
asked
damaged
after the candidate's gone off the stage? It seems like a strange presentation style. Now Liz has gone. What would you ask her?
Mostly are, in fact, all of you are going to be people that will be voting for our next Prime Minister. Have you received your ballot papers yet? No, you still haven't received them. You have one person, but most people haven't. OK, well, obviously we're moving on to the next section now of our programme. You'll be able to hear what Mr Sunak thinks, and then we're going to ask you what you think. How does that sound? Ladies and gentlemen, Rishi Sunak.
Brilliant.
So we're going to do exactly the same as we did with Liz Truss. Is that OK? We're going to start with the questions from the audience, and then I've got some questions for you as well, if that's OK.
All right.
Here we go.
Let's go.
Let's start our first question with Matthew. Matthew from Kent. There he is in the middle there. Matthew.
Good evening. Thanks,
Good
Kate.
evening.
Is there a point that you would stand aside in this campaign, Mr Sunak, given opinion polls are pointing to a dominant Miss Truss win, and also we're seeing daily declarations from big Tory big guns in her favour?
Well, thanks for the question, Matthew, and the quick answer is no. And that's because, well, thank you. and you know what? That's because I'm fighting for something I really believe in, and I'm taking my ideas around the country. I'm talking to all of you, our members across the country, about what I think's best for our country at a really difficult time. And I want to have that debate with people because I passionately believe what I'm saying is right. I want to convince as many people of that as possible, and hopefully I can do that with you all tonight. But you talk about big guns. I mean, I've also had, in the MP phase of this, in Parliament, the most number of MPs support me. Not just in the first round, but in every round since. You talk about big guns coming out. I just had Nigel Lawson this morning, Margaret Thatcher's Chancellor, supporting my approach to the economy. Michael Howard, a former leader of our party, just introduced me at a hustings yesterday. William Hague, another leader of our party,
Chancellor
my
35 years
predecessor
ago is back
in
to
Richmond
me.
and North Yorkshire, all supporting my candidacy. So look, I think I've got lots of support.
There are a load of has-beens who are too old to have any ambitions who are now backing me, even though everyone knows I'm going to lose.
For each and every one of your votes. The stakes are really high. I'm passionate what I believe in, and I want to try and convince you all that I'm right.
Anybody else that's going to support Mr Sunak? I'll get a few. You're all very quiet, though. Sir, you've got a question?
Yes, hi. No, I've been a Tory for the last 30 years, and I did stand for Parliament in 2005. Now, I've been absolutely disgusted with the level of disunity within the Tory party. So, yes, I'll be supporting you. But if you do become Prime Minister, how will you ensure that you unite the Tory party so that we can win the next general election?
Yeah, no, I'm so glad you asked that. It's a really important point because I think how we select this audience, we're all on the same team, right? We're all part of the same.
Whether or not the Tories win the next general election is going to have a lot more to do with whether or not they have a question to, or an answer to the fact that you're going to have more than a year of recession than whether or not they slag each other off on the radio.
That support is drawn from every bit of our parliamentary party.
Crazy,
people in the
right?
north, MPs in the south, MPs who voted Remain, MPs who voted Leave, experienced colleagues, the likes of which we just talked about in Matthew's question, but brand new MPs as well, MPs in rural areas and urban areas. So that's the breadth of my support, because that's the kind of person I am, that I can build a broad team around me. And that's what I'm going to do in government. I want to make sure that we have a government that represents all the talents and traditions of our amazing party, and you saw some of that on display in this leadership election early on. I want all of you to be able to look up the government and feel a piece of your view of conservatism represented. That's how we're going to bring people back together. Because we all know in this room, the enemy is not me or Liz or anyone else. Our real opposition is Keir Starmer and the Labour Party, and I'm the person who can take the fight to them and win the next election for all of us, because that's what we all want to see, isn't it?
That's what we all want to see, isn't it? Yes.
Actually, that's a similar question to Andrew from West London. Where's Andrew? Andrew.
I'm over here.
You're over there as well. Andrew, were you happy with that response?
Well, sort of, but I think historically we have to look at the fact that parties that are divided do not win elections. We are 2 years out, less than 2 years out from a general election. What specifics can we do? What specifics can you do to reunite the party?
Well, Andrew, you're right. We are only a couple of years out from a general election, and that's why getting on with the job as quickly as possible is really important. We don't have time to waste. So it's
Kay Burley's job here should be to move the conversation onto a topic that the people watching this show are going to actually care about.
Cabinet table and across government.
Go back to the economy.
No more who supported who in the leadership contest. We have to put all that aside the moment this contest ends and start looking forward and start delivering for the British people. We've got real challenges, and I'm sure we're going to get to talk about the economy in a minute, but that's the #1 challenge. We've got to get the NHS backlogs down. We've got to get to grips with illegal migration. We've got to make sure that we provide more energy for us all at home. There's lots of challenges we've got, and we need to get on and do them fast. So if we've got a brand new team, united in purpose, to deliver for the British people and focus on the prize of winning the next election, I think that will galvanise minds. I'm the person that can bring people together and lead us to that victory.
Can I come back
very quickly,
again?
if you wouldn't mind?
So how many people in the current cabinet would you have in your cabinet?
OK, go.
Well, Andrew, look, I don't think you'd expect me to answer that. A, it's premature, as we heard from the first question. I've got a lot of work to do in this campaign, and I'm going to fight for every vote, and that's what I'm focused on right now. But I will tell you, I will build a team that reflects the talents and traditions of our entire party.
OK, the ones that
and
are still
that's what you will be able to look up at my government and see yourself and everyone else reflected in
OK,
it.
Claire from Solihull. Claire.
OK, hi there,
Hi,
Rishi.
where are you, Claire?
My question is...
Hi, Claire.
Hi. The security of this country worries me greatly, with all the sabre rattling from Russia, China, Iran and North Korea. So if you become PM, will you commit to increasing the size and budget of our armed forces to make this country once again a force to be reckoned with?
Yes, Claire. The simple answer is absolutely. And I don't want to say once again, because I think we are already a force to be reckoned with. We're an amazing country that projects our values and our influence around the world, supporting our allies. So I don't think we have to...
That's not how the rest of the world sees us, because we invaded Iraq and caused the biggest geostrategic catastrophe that's faced the world in the last 25 years. People don't see us as a force for good.
That's my track record. And actually, I singled out the Ministry of Defence in the middle of the pandemic for a special treatment because they were going through a period where they were looking at future threats. They needed the certainty of knowing that they had the funding to make all those investments in the new technologies that would keep us safe. That's why I gave them special treatment.
That's not what the Prime Minister said. He said that you had to be... Actually, Ben Wallace said the Prime Minister had to overrule you.
No, that's not right. We actually do all these
Ben
things
Wallace
together.
Was wrong.
I'm not going to talk ill of any of my colleagues, but ultimately I'm the Chancellor that's responsible for the decisions on how we spend our money, and that's what I did, right? But you don't have to take my word for it there. When it came to Ukraine, what else did we do? I managed to find £2 billion from across government to send to Ukraine to support them so we can help them and protect our values and stand up to Russian aggression. But what I'm not going to do is stand here and give you an arbitrary target. And I know that's what Liz has said in this campaign, and I don't believe in that. I don't think that's the right response to defence spending. I don't believe in arbitrary targets. I believe in taking a threat-based approach. I believe in looking at the threats we face and then allocating spending accordingly. So what I can commit to you, Claire, is this. I will tell you, I will invest whatever it takes to keep you and everyone else in our country safe, because that is the first duty of a Prime Minister, and it's certainly the first duty of a Conservative Prime Minister.
Follow-up from this lady here. Just wait for the microphone, madam, if you would. There we go.
Thank you. You were also the Chancellor that introduced Eat Out to Dine Out at a cost of £850 million. And according to the University of Warwick, that was responsible for an increase of new COVID cases of between 8 and 17%.
Well, actually, that's one study that said that, and I don't think it's right. And it doesn't explain the fact that in almost every other country around Europe, everyone else experienced another wave of COVID, and they didn't all have the same policy. So it's a bit odd to blame that policy for an increase in COVID cases when that happened across Europe and indeed across most of the world. But I tell you what I was thinking at that moment. What I was looking at was a situation where we had hundreds of thousands of largely small hospitality businesses that were on the brink of bankruptcy. Because in this country, everyone was so scared and all the evidence said that no one was going to.
Why do you think he is still doing the race, Aaron?
And you know what's worse?
You know, Sunak doesn't seem like he's accepted losing. All the polls suggest he's completely down and out. But you know, I feel like people are already switching off from him. But why is he standing up and continuing to do it instead of taking a step back and accepting defeat?
I wanted to protect those jobs, those
I think for me, even more strange is he's not taking any big risks.
In this campaign across the country, I have people who come up to me and say thank you for that.
He's talking about eat out to help out.
Business and it saved those.
You're not going to win doing that, mate.
Well, the question was about it, but...
No, I know, but...
They like that one, Mr. Sunak. Tom
He's defending his record.
Behind you, Kay.
There we go.
Nobody cares.
That sounded slightly ominous.
I'm so sorry.
I'm a town councillor for Bury St Edmunds.
Oh, brilliant.
Thank you. And we lost our Kings Road NHS dentist. They were brilliant. That was in 2018. Now some of us are going around talking like tube stations. Mind the gap, mind the gap. What can be done? It's 2022. We need NHS dentistry because, frankly, a lot of us cannot afford to go private. And
You're a Tory councillor. You're the problem.
But we need our NHS back. What can you do? How soon can you do it?
Yeah.
That's the problem. I'm running
Self-immolate. Give up politics.
What happened to your teeth?
I lost them.
Well,
oh, goodness.
Yes.
You did.
We're getting an actual view right now in the camera in your mouth. We're actually
amazing, Michael.
I have 7
Tory
fillings,
councillors
and
losing
that's
teeth.
because I drank an enormous amount of Coke when I was a youngster, so I feel your pain. And we do need good dentistry.
Yeah.
And look, the NHS, first of all, is everyone's #1 public service.
Luckily, I can afford it, not on the
I grew up
NHS.
in
But
an NHS household. You may have heard on this campaign, my dad was
He
a
never
GP.
mentions it.
And my mum, just checking, you never know, right? You know, and my mum ran a chemist where I grew up. So I spent my time working in that. I understand how important, especially primary care is. But look, you know, if we're going to get to grips with this and make sure that there is money for NHS dentistry, we just have to be bolder about reforming the NHS to get more efficiency out of it. Now, I'm someone who you can absolutely trust with the NHS. I'm someone who did something quite difficult, and that's create a new funding stream to support
more money.
Serco and Sodexo. Yeah.
It does start with putting more resources in to help recover from the pandemic. Wasn't an easy thing for me to do.
To help recover from 12 years of Tory austerity, my friend.
It was the right thing for the country, the right thing to support our fantastic NHS doctors and nurses. But money's not enough. We need to reform things so we can get more efficiency and invest in things like dentistry. I'll give you one example of something that I'm prepared to do, which is a bit bold, it is a bit radical, and not everyone will love it, but I want to show you that I'm going to bring some change, and that's tackling missed appointments. Now, we have over 10 million missed appointments every year, and it's not just GPs, it's in hospitals. At the same time, we've got lots of people sitting there anxiously waiting for treatment, and I've said that's not acceptable. So we need to be tougher on missed appointments, because if we are, then if people can cancel them in advance properly, we free up all that extra capacity, and none of us have to pay an extra penny in taxes to do that.
Give them more money, pay the doctors properly. What you've also got is people who turn up to their appointment and then the routine operation constantly gets cancelled because the NHS is working at full capacity and so they can't do the operation.
Do they not get treatment in future? What happens?
Well, actually, Kate, as I said, you don't have to do it on people's first missed. It can be for people who missed a second appointment because there are just so many that there's a lot of space.
We're probably chronically ill.
My dentist, if you miss two appointments, they give you the boot.
But it's not free at the point of
and by the way,
and when people
they've just gone private.
They are depriving
because inflation is too high.
Of treatment that they need. So there's someone equally vulnerable waiting there, sitting on a waiting list, waiting to see their consultant or their GP, and they're not getting that chance because someone else has just not bothered to show up, and that's not all right. And look, there will be some people like you who say, oh, gosh,
saying
maybe
the
we
crisis in the
shouldn't do
NHS
that.
is
But
the
if we're
fault of
not
patients,
prepared to
is essentially what he's saying.
If we're not prepared to do things...
Chronically ill people, presumably with complex lives, that's why people miss appointments,
for
right?
all sorts of reasons, and they can't
you can be
afford these
compassionate
fights.
first time, but at the end of the day, if we all want to cut taxes in this country, if we want to find money to spend more on dentistry, we have to be prepared to do things differently, challenge the system, and that's what I'm prepared to do.
Challenge the system? You're talking about challenging the patients, my friend.
For you and for my future fillings, but I do want to be able to cut your taxes too. We're only going to be able to do that if we're going to reform things and do things differently. That's the kind of Prime Minister I'm going to be.
You can only be compassionate once. Jeff from Devon. Jeff, where are we, Jeff?
Over here.
Hey, Jeff. Oh, you're all over here today.
Yeah. Gosh,
Hi.
right. Is it Jeff, was it?
Jeff.
Yes, Rishi, yes.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hiya. Given the problems we've had with borders control and obviously the massive controversy with the Rwanda policy, what's your plan
Inflation? We're still talking about inflation.
Illegal channel crossings.
Yes. Great question, and something I've been talking a lot about over the last couple of weeks. Look,
Bad look for the Tory membership, isn't it? Like, none of the questions are about the big news of the day, which is we're going to face more than a year of recession and 17% inflation.
Family a beneficiary of that, probably others in the audience, and it's
They're
something that we should
councillors
all
and
feel
stuff,
really
right?
proud
Like
of. It's
people on the doorstep
amazing at.
talk about this.
Recently, Ukraine, Hong Kong, Syria, Afghanistan, we showed our compassion. But it is also absolutely right that we have control over our borders, because all the people I just mentioned came here legally. And what is not right is for people to break the rules and come here illegally. The scenes we see on our TV screens and small boat crossings
They come here illegally
are wrong,
because there's no way for them to come here legally.
and I'm prepared, again, to do some different things to be
Well,
bold
Mo
and radical
Farah.
to stop them.
You should ask him
There's
that.
a
Would you
10-point plan
deport
on
Mo
my website
Farah?
with a video, so you please go and have a look
He
at
came
that
here
tonight,
illegally.
and anyone else that's interested in this topic. I'll give you 2 examples of things that I'm prepared to do now. One is we need to change the definition of asylum and move away from this European definition, which has become very broad. It's exploited by lefty
isn't it an
lawyers.
international
That means
definition?
it's very hard to remove people. I suggest
There's a
moving to
European definition and there's a... he's talking about the Geneva Convention. The Geneva Convention doesn't include degrading treatment. One of them includes inhumane and degrading treatment and one of them doesn't. And he wants the one that doesn't because he wants us to be able to send people back to inhuman and degrading treatment, I think is the long and the
talk
short.
about the trade deal we're going to give them and maybe even the aid that we're going to send that country. But we don't then also say, hang on, you have to take back your failed asylum seekers. Well, that's not right. We should be more joined up. We should be tougher about that. So that's just 2 of the things in my 10-point plan. But fundamentally, we must get a grip of this. We have to make the Rwanda policy work. I will do whatever it takes, including legal changes if required, to make it work so we get control of our borders. Although we're a compassionate country and will always be, it's entirely right, and many of us voted Brexit for this reason, that we are in control of who's coming here. That's a simple thing, and I will deliver it as PM.
OK. Applause on that one. Gentlemen, there
That is first round of applause.
If we can just stretch over with the microphone for you, sir. There we go. Your question, really quickly.
So we currently have a points-based immigration system. Do you propose any changes or are you happy to keep it as it is?
So look, on immigration, look, we have to tackle this question of illegal, Jeff's question on illegal migration. We should tackle that robustly and radically. So that's part one. Now, with the rest of immigration, right, there's a couple of things. I want to be pragmatic about this. So I want to make sure that we're also supporting our economy to grow. And that means having an immigration system that actually welcomes the best and the brightest from around the world. Because if we want to grow our economy, if we want
Puts a cap on refugee numbers. That's the policy he's proposed.
who are going to come and research in our universities, who are going to come and work at some of
Sorry,
our
we accept
fastest
you'll be
growing
tortured if you get sent back home, but we've already reached our limit.
regime that makes us the best place in the world for all those people to come. I started
Why
reforming
would
the
they
system
come here?
as Chancellor and as Prime Minister.
Why
I
would
want to
those
finish
people
the
come here when inflation is 17% and you could spend £2,000 a month in London for a shoebox? Why would they come
The UK is the
here?
place I want to come, because if we can attract them here, it's going to be good for all of us, it's going to be good for the economy, and that's something that I want to deliver.
OK, we've got a question from Alexander on trust. Alexander, you've got a question for Alexander's just...
Oh, my God, Michael.
What does honesty mean to you?
Buddy, oh, great. Real accountability.
Great question. So look, honestly, in a sense, it means telling you the truth, right? And even when that's not easy. And I think you can see in this leadership election, that's what I'm doing, right? And that first question at the beginning of how I'm doing in the polls and all of that, right? I am saying some things that are maybe not the easiest thing in the world to hear. I'm not sitting here or standing here promising you tens and tens of billions of pounds of goodies straight away, because I don't think that's the right thing to do for our economy. I think it's risky. I think it risks making the inflation problem far worse and costing you all far more. And you know what? My life would be far easier if I wasn't saying that, right? But I want to be honest with you. I want to be straight with a country about the challenges we face and what is going to be required to fix them.
He wants to say, my life would be a lot easier if I was on a beach in California doing consultancy for Facebook. My life would be a lot easier.
Mr. Sunak, we've seen the images of what you were allegedly, Nadine Dorries, I think it was, who came up with this. I don't know, has anybody seen it? Yeah. Stabbing you in the back. I mean, how do you respond to that?
Sorry, Kay, what do you...
Well, my point is we're talking about trust. You can't be trusted.
Which bit
is what Nadine Dorries...
You knife in Boris for your own interest.
There you go.
Right, perfect, right, OK, let's address that. That's actually great that you've raised it. Sorry, what was your name, sir? Stephen, right. So, yes, I worked with the Prime Minister for a couple of years, and I'm really proud of the work we achieved together, actually, and I think he deserves enormous credit for what he achieved during that time. And as I said, I'm proud to have been a part of it, and he gave me the job I had, and I'm grateful to him for it. But it got to a point where it was too difficult for me to stay. Now, we had well-documented differences of opinion on economic policy, as you can see in this leadership campaign, by the way, and it's simply impossible for a Chancellor and Prime Minister not to be on the same page when it comes to economic policy. That doesn't make sense, and there's no way that can work. So, of course,
we've heard all of this before. Like, he's said this answer word for word before.
The government was on the wrong side of an ethical problem that I could not defend. And enough
The fix
was enough
is in,
for me.
Michael.
But it wasn't just me, Steve. It was
The fix
60
is in.
other members of Parliament all left the government.
Sky went
at
after
the
the
same
Truss
time,
because
for
she's
them,
so
enough
far
was
ahead.
enough.
They've given him.
That's why
This
we're
is a
here,
non-event.
because we need
Our
to change
websites
things.
in December last year.
I mean, maybe Kay Bailey will presumably talk a lot more about the economy than...
And it was perfectly timed, a cynical motivation to
this
try and get
Tory
you to
membership
number 10.
completely out of touch audience who don't seem to care about any of the concerns of the rest of the
So I
country.
was due to give a speech with the Prime Minister the next week, and in the conversations about putting that speech together on the economy, it was clear our differences were too big to reconcile.
Okay.
So that was the reason. Plus, I think let's not look at the bars with rose-tinted spectacles here. Everyone remembers what was going on with Chris Pincher, right? Yeah. That was a serious ethical question that the government was on the wrong side of again, and I couldn't defend it. Maybe you're okay to defend that. I wasn't okay to defend it. 60 other members of the government were not okay to defend it because it was wrong. And that's why we're here, because we need to change things. We need to bring trust and integrity and decency and honesty back into politics.
Okay.
And that's what I want to do as Prime Minister.
OK, I'm going to have to brush up on my Shakespearean references, I can tell. Let's bring in David from London, finally. Where are you, David? David's here. Hi, David, go on.
Hi, Kay, thank you.
David, hi.
Good evening, Mr Sunak. How will you balance the need to address the escalating cost of living crisis, particularly for those that are on lower incomes, alongside the need to keep the economy in good order and national debt not spiralling out of control?
Okay, badly
David,
framed question,
your
but at least
question
he's addressed the
is actually
actual
the most
issue of the
important
day.
one facing the country
And the
right
year.
now. Right, and I'm sure many of you saw what the Bank of England had to say today. And if we in the Conservative Party need to get real and fast, because the lights on the economy are flashing red, and the root cause is inflation. Now, I'm worried that Liz Truss's plans will make the situation worse. And what I want to do is different. I think the government's #1 priority should be grappling with inflation. That's what I want to do. I also want to help people with the cost of living over the autumn and winter, particularly, as you said, the people who most need our help. And that's what I announced as Chancellor. That's how I acted over the past 2 years. That's what I'll do as your Prime Minister. That's what a Conservative government should do, support those who need our help most at a time of need. But then also, I want to grow the economy. And I want businesses to be producing more. And that's how we're going to not just grow the economy and create jobs, it's how we're going to get inflation down over time. I've got a plan to do all of those things. But it all starts with not making the situation worse. Because if we just put fuel on the fire of this inflation spiral, all of us, all of you, are going to just end up with higher mortgage rates, savings and pensions that are eaten away, and misery for millions. I don't want that to happen, and that's why I am so focused on gripping inflation first.
OK, ladies and gentlemen, Mr Sunak, have a seat.
All right. Thank you.
Need any water?
Yes, why not? Right.
Excellent. Right, my turn. Here we go. Let's talk about the economy to start with, should we? Today, as was being pointed out, the Bank of England saying that we're going to be in recession before the end of the year, and that's going to last until 2024. People watching at home, and I'm guessing some people here as well, facing months and months of hardship. You've been their Chancellor for the last 2 years. Why on earth should they trust you with the keys of number 10?
In fact, because they've seen me as Chancellor over the last couple of years, and I think, actually, Kate, probably the first time people really saw me was that first press conference when there was an enormous amount of anxiety in the country about what was going to happen to people's jobs, their livelihoods, their businesses, and they didn't really know who I was. I'd just been made Chancellor a couple of weeks before. But I stepped up at that moment to act boldly and radically, to design things that had never been done before in this country.
I need to ask him more about the previous 10 years. Like, it is Cameron Osborne austerity. Do you back that? You backed that at the time. That's why we're in the mess we're in.
And for our economy to emerge at the end of that in far more resilient shape than anyone had anticipated at the beginning. And when I go around the country, people know that that's what I did for them. They're grateful for it. And that's what I want to do as Prime Minister, because right now we face similarly large economic
They're
challenges.
grateful for it. It's their taxes.
Because of my experience that I'm well placed to deal with them.
Nothing you can do about recession, though, is there? Or is there?
Of course there is. Of course there is. Back to David's question, the number one thing we have to do is not make the situation worse. What is causing the recession? Right? As you heard from the Bank of England today, and I think Liz said something before, which I'm just going to correct, it's not the tax burden that is causing the recession. That's simply wrong. What's causing the recession is inflation. Right? That's the root of the problems we have, not just here, but in America and elsewhere. So the way we're going to get through
the
this,
other root of the problem we have is 12 years of underinvestment, which means that we went into this inflationary crisis with shoddy wages and a shoddy economy because nothing's been invested in for a decade.
To help grow the economy in the long term.
That's why the NHS is in crisis. The NHS isn't in crisis because of inflation.
Money to help people
of course I would.
Do you know how much?
Well, we'll have to see the size of the problem. But look, people can see
13.3% inflation is what's predicted. That's the size of the problem.
And I don't want that to be worse.
RPI is 17%.
I don't want it to last longer. So what I'm not going to do is embark on a borrowing spree worth tens of billions of pounds, put that on the country's credit card, ask our kids and our grandkids to pick up the tab, because that's not right, it's not responsible, and it's certainly not conservative.
But you're promising tax cuts without knowing where inflation will be.
I'm the one that's not sitting here now, promising tens of billions of pounds of unfunded tax cuts.
What you've actually said is no tax cuts until inflation gets under control. What amounts to under control?
When it's on a clearly
2%?
downward trajectory and we have good line of sight that it is returning back to target, right?
Okay.
Right.
But the target's 2%.
That's why we need to be really careful
about
policies that will make that worse, right? And look, if that took the first question, I'm behind in this race.
I'm just a bit confused. So you're saying these income tax cuts might not happen? It depends.
You're talking about my longer-term plan?
Yes, of course I am.
Yeah, my longer-term plan, I'm confident we can deliver it, yes, right? And that was the reason I published that longer-term plan. And that
inflation is not hitting 2% before 2024.
Was to, over time, reduce income tax rates in this country.
He's fucked himself.
I believe really strongly.
I mean, he's also not going to be Prime Minister before 2024, so it doesn't matter that much, does it?
I think most Conservatives share that view, that hard work is something that should be.
There will be no tax cuts until inflation is at 2%. Okay, well, there will be. Okay, and there are no tax cuts.
Income tax. And I wanted to give people a sense of the direction of where I wanted to take the country and the economy. And I want to build an economy where we cut the rates of income tax over time. And we're going to do that not by asking our kids to pick up the bill. We're going to do it by being disciplined on public spending,
economics is where you're very comfortable, and we know exactly what you think. What we don't probably know about is foreign affairs as much. So let me ask you about energy and food bills and how that relates to foreign affairs potentially. How high do you think that energy and food bills will have to go before we reassess our support for Ukraine?
No, I don't think that's how we're going to look at it, actually, because we can make an enormous difference between now and actually next winter in reducing our dependence on Russian energy. So in the short term, of course, we're going to step in, and I want to step in and help people more. I announced enormous support as Chancellor. As Prime Minister, I'll go further because the situation has deteriorated. But what I'm looking to is by next winter that we've got through this. And there's lots of things we can do to help us do that. So I'll give a couple of examples, right? So one thing we can do is improve our energy storage, because actually we can import lots of gas in the middle of the year.
That takes time, though, doesn't it?
No, we can do that relatively quickly, improved energy storage during the middle of the year. But the other thing we can do is energy efficiency. Now, many of you here, many people watching, are living in homes where we can help improve the insulation. Loft insulation, cavity wall insulation, smart temperature control.
He already had a non-programme on this, which nobody got any money for.
Very long or cost a fortune, and government has got money. But if we turbocharge that programme, we can not only reduce our demand for energy.
I swear, these are all the programs that got gutted as well because he was saying, "Oh no, we can't possibly spend any money." Right? I swear there were more ambitious plans to insulate people's homes, and he blocked them all.
Loft anyway for climate change reasons, right? Because it's good to reduce our long-term demand on energy, right? But what we do want to do is make sure we help people with their bills, and that's a good practical example of something we can do.
On the conflict in Ukraine, Boris Johnson has really thrown himself into the cause. I think everybody might agree with that. He's regarded as a hero, apparently, in Ukraine. That's what he tells us. He brandishes his missile launchers. We've seen that. Are you really tough enough to stand up to Vladimir Putin?
Well, just think for a moment. How are we currently standing up?
This is your hell yeah moment.
Yeah. So how are we standing up to Vladimir Putin? Right? How are we actually doing it? We're doing two things. Right? We're sending arms and money to Ukraine. which, as we talked about earlier, I found from elsewhere in government spending so that we could free up that money to send to President Zelensky. But what's the other way we're weakening Russia? We're doing it through economic sanctions, right? We're not sending our troops into Russia, right? It's not diplomatic measures that are making a difference, it's economic. What are we doing? We're targeting his companies, their access to global capital markets.
It's quite a smart answer, saying his job is actually more important than Liz Truss's when it comes to Russia-Ukraine, which probably is true.
Who do you think put all those things together? I did with all my finance minister colleagues around the world, working with the Treasury Secretary in America, working with European finance ministers. We designed an international package of economic sanctions that sends a very strong message that we will not stand for his aggression.
All Liz Truss does is say mad shit about Russia leaving every inch of Ukraine.
The world has ever seen, and it is making a difference. And as Prime Minister, I will go further because there's more things we can do. So, yes, I'm tough enough, and I'm already delivering the measures that are actually causing him the most trouble. Thank you.
Good answer.
Ben Wallace, as I mentioned before, said that you had to be overruled on defence spending. Priti Patel, the Home Secretary, reportedly said that you objected to the Rwanda plan during a written discussion between the departments. Brandon Lewis, the Northern Ireland Secretary, former Northern Ireland Secretary, has accused you of putting up huge resistance on efforts to override the Northern Ireland Protocol. It looks as though there's a recurring theme there, doesn't there? You say one thing in private and then you say something else for voter consumption. So should we believe them or should we believe you?
Well, look, when it comes to the Rwanda plan, I do believe in the Rwanda policy, but do I ask tough questions when cabinet ministers come to me and say, oh, look, we like to do this new thing? Yeah, because my job is to make sure that yours and everyone else watching and everyone in this audience's money is spent properly. That's part of my job. I wouldn't be doing my job properly if every time some cabinet minister came to me and said, oh, please, can I have X billion pounds to do this new thing? I don't say, whoa, hang on, let me just check that this actually is going to work. Is it worth us spending taxpayers' money on it?
So you think spending £120 million on sending 200 people to Rwanda is good value for money?
Yeah, well, it's a pilot, right? So the pilot bit is expensive. So you're asking
Remember the
now
things
exactly
that he
the
blocked
questions I was
were
asking.
the educations, the government's own educations are recommending the money that would be needed to catch up Britain's kids after missing all that school after COVID. And he was like, nope.
It's not good enough in government to just announce things. It's not good enough to put out a press release. It's
£120 million to probably send no one to Rwanda.
People saw from me during the pandemic as Chancellor that I could deliver things. I actually delivered policies that worked and made a difference, which, by the way, were done in record time and were radical. And I will bring that same sense of grip and urgency and competence to all these other challenges, whether it's the Rwanda policy, whether it's the NHS backlogs.
OK, let's talk about climate. You brought it up. We're trying to whiz through these topics as best we can because obviously some of these people have not got their ballot papers yet, some have, and what you're telling them, both here in the studio and at home this evening, could make the difference as to whether or not you are the next Prime Minister of this country. So let's talk about the climate, should we? One issue that affects not just our finances, but of course our future, is your green credentials. Can I test them?
Sure.
Here we go. New coal mines, yes or no?
They're local decisions, but I don't think we should be importing coal from other places if we have it at home.
OK. What about fracking?
Where it has the support of local communities, I'm in favour of it.
OK, but we have seen some big issues with fracking, haven't we, particularly in my part of the world, in the northwest of England, where we've seen at least 3 earthquakes that apparently have been caused by fracking.
Yeah, but we also, as I said, most importantly, it has to be done with the support of local communities. But we do also have a study from, I think 3 different royal societies. I think of geologists and engineers and I can't remember the third group, but it's online somewhere, all of whom said that they believe fracking is safe and the seismic activity is not out of the ordinary. They're all the scientists who have came to that conclusion, not me. But as I said, I'm supportive of it where we can bring the local community along with us, because if we can get it to work, it's good for our long-term energy security.
Would you raise flight taxes?
Would I raise?
Flight taxes?
No.
Why not?
Well,
it cost me and my wife too much money.
I already made a change to airline taxation.
You did. Not very green, though, was it?
Yes, it was, actually, because I did 2 things. One is I reversed a European rule that forced us to charge people twice when they flew inside of the United Kingdom on air passenger duty. I didn't think that was right, and after we left the EU, we could say we're not going to do that anymore. If you fly around the UK, because we believe in a United Kingdom, you should only be taxed once. But at the same time, I created a new band.
We believe in the United Kingdom, so you can fly around the United Kingdom.
I created a brand new band with a higher level of tax. So actually it was balanced.
I believe in the
So
United
for
Kingdom,
people
but I prefer
flying with
trains.
more emissions, they were going to pay more. For people flying within the
Let me
United
ask you-
Kingdom, we took an advantage of Brexit
Okay, let
and
me
cut
ask you
taxes
about
there.
onshore wind, yes or no? Because I'm a bit confused on this one. Onshore wind, forgive me, yes or no?
No.
Okay, you've changed your mind.
No, I haven't. Last night I was asked a question, I didn't fully understand it and I misspoke, but my position on that
Tories
is the
like
same as
onshore
it's been.
winds.
Okay,
People
how
have
are we going to get
changed.
to net zero by 2050?
With
I thought he said no to onshore wind. Sorry, what was the question? Maybe I missed the
I want to
question.
create is one where this, and we
Onshore
talked
wind,
about it
he
in the
said
answer
no.
to the visas question from someone.
Okay.
If we have an economy where this is the best place in the world for people to create, invent, discover new things, we will get there. And
Okay.
we will get there in a way that lowers people's bills.
Okay.
Now, look, my business background, my experience...
This is a
means
religion.
I know how to
This is
build
theology.
that type of economy in this
We've got
country.
to rush through this.
Okay.
This is like believing. This is like believing in the second coming of Christ in like the first
If you
century.
don't mind, quick fire questions. Here we go. Do you personally support the 24-week limit on abortion?
As a personal thing, yes. I mean, these are personal decisions. They're not government decisions. I don't think there's
it's
any need
law.
to change I believe in a woman's right to choose. I don't think there's any reason to change the laws that we have.
Why have you abstained on every major vote on abortion?
Probably because I've not been in Parliament on the day.
You didn't think it was important enough to be there?
Because as Chancellor, I'm often travelling.
2015, apparently. Were you Chancellor in 2015?
Mr.
No,
Slippery.
but these are not free. I mean, I completely agree with our current system of abortion. I don't think it should be changed.
Okay.
So if the vote, I mean, so that's my general view. That's always been my
Okay,
view.
you just haven't been there when the votes have been taking place. Would you fist bump the Saudi leader Mohammed bin Salman as Joe Biden did?
I'm probably not a fist-bumping type of person, I think,
Okay,
probably.
would you shake his hand then?
I mean, yes, I would shake his hand. I think I generally I think you do have to engage with people around the world. I don't think... and they're a country that we have a relationship with.
In a video, here it comes, from 2001, you said you didn't have any working-class friends. Have you made any working-class friends since you left university?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was a student when I said that. We all say silly things when we're younger.
Answer the
I mean,
question,
at the
have
same time,
you?
I was, as you know, I was working in my mum's shop. I was out and about, cycling around, running around, delivering medicines to people, all people from all walks of life. But, you know, obviously I was a kid and I said something silly.
So you do have working-class friends now?
Yeah, I mean, I don't go around asking them what how they define themselves.
Who?
I mean,
She just needs to say one word. Who?
I think we've moved beyond that as a country, actually.
How
I think,
reassuring.
Yeah, I think
No, we
I'm
haven't.
less interested in where you've come from. People are
We
interested
have
in
not
where
moved
you're
beyond
going.
class
That's
as a
the kind of country I
country.
want to build, right?
That's what rich people
we
say.
haven't.
Let me ask you the same question that I asked Liz Truss.
Listen, you little
about being
posh
Prime
shit,
Minister
who
in
are
the most
they?
invasive, exposed period in any politician's life. Anything you want to tell us about?
No. I mean, look, I've had a relatively high-profile job for 2 years, and I think people have seen me in action, and they've seen what I can do. They've seen, and look, much of my personal life has also been talked about earlier this year, and that was an experience that I took, that I learnt from. And
My wife is a non-dom, but you know that already.
Okay. Another simple question. Have you ever benefited financially from the use of tax havens?
No.
A venture capital firm you co-founded, Tellman Partners, was registered in the Cayman Islands. So just to clarify,
I personally
did you
have
benefit
absolutely
financially
never ever
from it?
benefited and have paid absolutely full normal taxes wherever I've lived.
Did you set up that business?
No.
Okay, so you weren't a co-founder in 2009?
Not of the bit in the Cayman Islands that you're referring to. I have nothing to do with.
Okay.
I mean, I happen to work with a company that has multiple offices all around the world, but that's not my responsibility. It was not running the company
So
or
you
setting
weren't
that
in
up.
any way paid by that offshore company? No
Absolutely
connections
not.
with
No.
it?
When I was living in America, I paid all my taxes
whatsoever?
in America, and when
I want the reveal now. I want the reveal. Well, I have this document.
anyone else would.
Okay, the reason I'm asking is that, as you know,
Here we
as
go.
all our audience know, you've had to clarify your wife's non-dom status. You held permanent residency in the United States while you were setting the taxes of British voters, which is what a green card means. You're building a swimming pool at your constituency home while the public pool in Richmond is facing closure after a 400% energy hike. This has all led to a perception problem for you. People feel that you can't walk a mile in their shoes because you're walking in your Prada shoes. What would you say to them?
So, look, over the past couple of weeks, right, I've been out and about across the country talking to members of the public, and as I was saying, lots of people have come to talk to me about that press conference and furlough and what difference it made to their lives. Do you know, I was wearing the same suit in that press conference, the same shoes as that I'm wearing now, right? I'm the same person.
How much were they worth?
Yeah,
They're very slick.
I'm exactly the same person, right? I'm the same person that stood there and made sure that we helped the country through a very difficult time.
Do you think it's acceptable to be building a swimming pool in your private garden while your local council swimming pool is being closed down? That's the issue. Tory members love this shit.
Yeah, they're going to applaud their Tories.
That certainly seems to be
They're
the
gonna
case as far as
applaud.
the audience is concerned here, but there's plenty of people who are watching at home who would disagree with that. Perception is reality, and they think that you're too rich to be Prime Minister.
Yeah, well, the reality is one of the last things I did as Chancellor was announce significant help for people with their energy bills this autumn and winter. And to the question we had at the front, from David, I think it was, right? David's question was about helping the most vulnerable, right? People who really needed help. That's what I did. Because, look, we're all going to have a difficult time, and inflation makes everyone poorer, and that's why I'm so concerned about policies that will make it worse and last longer, and that's not right. But when we do need to help people this autumn and winter, our focus should be on the people who most need our help. And actually, when Liz is sitting here saying she's going to scrap the NHS levy, do you know who that benefits? That benefits the top 15% of earners. Right? That's what that policy does. It's not going to help the people that David was asking about with the cost of living this winter. Right? The policies I announced as Chancellor are targeted on those people because they are the people that need our help. Right? It's going to be really tough. It's going to be really tough for lots of people. And much as I want to support them to work hard and do those things, right, it's going to be just impossible for some people, and we need to help them, and that's what I did.
You can't do all of that on your own. Penny Mordaunt has backed Ms Truss. Ben Wallace has backed Ms Truss. Nadeem Zahawi has backed Ms Truss. Tom Tugendhat has backed Liz Truss. Sajid Javid, your old boss, has backed Ms Truss. Why are so many people supporting her rather than you?
Right, but Kate, it goes back to the question right at the beginning.
Because they think she's going to win. If he'd said that, I would have respected that.
Process. I have the broadest...
Because they think she's going to win, you know.
Work most closely with you.
Glory hunters.
And they've decided
We've all known them.
No, well, hang on. Most MPs in Parliament, and all MPs work together in lots of different guises.
He doesn't give many straight answers. Trust sometimes gives a straight answer.
Penny Mordaunt are not in the cabinet, actually. But every single round of the parliamentary process...
Would they be in your cabinet?
He's very Cameron Osborne, isn't he?
I was the person that MPs chose every round ahead of everyone else. And since it finished, more and more people have come and joined the team. So I'm really humbled by that, and I'm delighted. And actually, as we were answering a question, that support is drawn really widely from across the parliamentary party. And I'm not going to get into who's going to have this job and that job. I've got a contest that I want to try and win. I want to be out and about talking to all of you about my
Skeletor to
ideas for
Attila the
future.
Hun.
But I will build a team that reflects all the talent and traditions of our party, as I said. You saw a lot of that on display in this leadership contest. And as we talked about before, we're all one team. We're all one family. We're going to come together after this. We're going to serve the British people, and then we're going to take it to Keir Starmer and win the next election.
We're going to make poor people poorer.
That's the real prize.
One family, the West.
Final thought: when you go, when you look at yourself in the mirror at night just before you go to bed, and you think, all these people that have sat around the cabinet table with me, and now they don't want to work with me. They think that the other candidate's better.
But plenty of people sat around the cabinet table also support me. Right, Dominic Raab, the Deputy Prime Minister, is out there right now talking about it, and lots of others. But I also, as I said, now answer to the question.
Just him.
Right. But I think we only just have one person, right? Yeah, much as we love you and we love Sky, I think that's where we tolerate just one person giving up their evening to come and talk to you later. But I've been really humbled.
Not sure how to take that, actually.
Well, you know what? I think
that's
people...
a perfect place to end. It's lovely to see you. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much.
Very nice to see you. Thanks very much.
Stay with us 1 second, if you will. Stay with us. Thank you. So our candidates have had their chance to make their case, but what do the people who will decide their future make of it? We have a simple question for our audience. Are you ready, audience? We rehearsed this beforehand. After what you have heard tonight, who are you most likely to vote for? As you know, you need to press 1 and then send if it's Rishi Sunak, and you need to press 2 and then send if it is Liz Truss. Are we all ready? Any more questions before we need to do that?
She said this is supposed to be a representative-ish sample of Tory members.
Away you go. There we go.
I don't really know how they work that out.
We have 15 seconds when people will
There's
press
more than one BAME
for Rishi
person, so I think
Sunak,
that's true.
or 2
that's
for
what I
Liz
was
Truss,
thinking when I
and then
watched
pressing send, and then, as if by magic, in just a few moments' time, we'll find out what our audience here in the studio thinks about who should be the next Prime Minister of this country. Worth just pointing out at this stage that 0.3% of the electorate will decide our next Prime Minister, which means 99.7% of the electorate will not be doing that. Do you think that's fair?
Yes. Yes.
Why do you think it's fair? Gentlemen here, why do you think it's
We
fair?
live in a party system.
It doesn't say who's the next Prime Minister. We have a parliamentary system. People voted for the Conservative Party. And as members, we're electing the leader. It happens to be that that leader becomes Prime Minister. This is a basic understanding of our system.
Thank you, gentlemen up here, really
Absolutely.
quickly with the check shirt. Yep.
It's exactly the same as what Labour did when they chose.
Okay. Now, as with all things with live television, the technology has crashed. So what we're going to do instead is go with a show of hands instead. Are we happy with that? So will you allow me to say who I think has probably got more hands?
That was relatively smooth, given that was a real fuck up from.
That Rishi Sunak had a better show and as a result would potentially make the better Prime Minister of this country, can you put your hand up now, ladies and gentlemen, please? Oh, my goodness. Oh. That looks to me like an awful lot for Mr Sunak. Who would prefer Ms Truss as the next Prime Minister?
Wow.
Now, I wasn't expecting that, I have to say, but I think with just keeping your hands up for Ms Truss, while we get some more shots just to show people at home, it looks to me as though Mr Sunak convinced you far more than Ms Truss. And I'm sorry, so we're almost out of time, and I have had you let you have a couple of goals. I think the only thing that he probably needs to learn from tonight is to read a bit of Shakespeare. I don't know what you think. Anyway, it's been fantastic to see you all. Thank you so much for taking the time for joining us. Thank you also to Ms Truss and also to Mr Sunak. They were amazing. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Really, really.
Aaron, do you think the audience picking Rishi Sunak means that Rishi Sunak might really be in the... Is that he convinced people, or did they just not get a particularly representative sample of the Tory party, or are YouGov completely wrong when they have, Liz Truss on essentially twice the support of Rishi Sunak?
I don't trust TV producers to get a reflective audience of anything, no, personally. I mean, I could be wrong. I mean, nonetheless, that is still surprising, right? Even if you have a massively misrepresentative sample, that's still... I mean, Sunak won that by 6-1. He's meant to be losing 2-1. So even if it's completely unreflective and unrepresentative, that's still quite a big deal. But who knows? Who knows, Michael? Honestly, I don't place any faith in.
Yeah, I think he was the stronger one. I mean, I think if YouGov have Liz Truss on 2-1 to Sunak, I'm pretty sure she's going to win regardless of who puts up their hands in what studio audience. But I do think he was stronger just because the weakest part, the worst part of that whole show from a candidate perspective was Liz Truss talking about the economy. The economy is the biggest issue by a long way right now. She has absolutely zero answers whatsoever. She's like, how are you going to help someone this year? Or it's the strongest part of the show, the strongest thing from Kay Burley as well. How are you going to help this single mum on 10K who's going to get her energy bills rise by by $1,000 or $2,000, whatever, this winter? How are you going to help her? She says, oh, we'll cut national insurance. She doesn't pay national insurance. Oh, we'll cut corporation tax. How is that going to help her this winter? Oh, we'll dig up more oil and gas from the North Sea. Now, this is just fairyland you're in, Liz Truss. And so I think, if you're a Tory party strategist, you're going to be pretty worried that the next Tory Prime Minister doesn't understand economics and doesn't understand the cost of living crisis, doesn't seem to be able to relate to the struggles that people are going to go through this winter, or even pretend to care. Rishi Sunak is actually quite good at pretending to care about these things, right? She's not. And so I do think, that should be worrying for her. I mean, obviously it's worrying for us, but our expectations are very low in terms of having a Prime Minister at the end of this summer who's going to care about supporting people through the cost of living crisis. But she can't even talk the talk,
I agree, but also substantively their positions are quite different. And actually, when it comes to using deficit spending to probably ease the cost of living crisis over the next 12, 18 months, 2 years, from what they said this evening, she would be more likely to do that. She'd be more likely to respond with deficit-funded tax cuts or deficit-funded government intervention or subsidies or caps of some kind, and whatever it may be. And I think also... No, but I think the situation is going to get so bad. I think that sort of stuff will happen, Michael. Whoever wins, I think when you've got energy prices tripling, when you've got 17% inflation, when you've got the base rate of interest going from what it was, lower than 1% for the best part of a decade, or even actually for a decade, to it going maybe to 3-4%, renters, that those costs are then passed on from buy-to-let landlords onto renters. That means, people's rents are going to go up £400, £500, £600 a month within a year. These are quite significant shifts. So, I mean, you see it already, actually, Michael. It's not been commented upon, but, there's one cohort of student loan, people with student loans. They were paying an interest rate of RPI plus 3%. The government said, I think a month or two ago, actually from September, that's clearly mad because you'll have credit card style interest rates for your student debt. We're going to cap it at 7.5%. I think that's so we're already seeing in some areas of the economy, quite small, and the media's not really talking about it very much, but we're seeing the kind of responses which I think will be more interventionist. And I do think, given what Liz Truss is saying on, she's happy to care, you lean into the deficit. We haven't got a problem with our national debt. Japan, the US, Canada have bigger national debts than we do. I think she's more likely to lean into that in a vaguely progressive way than Sunak is. Of course, both of them are deeply regressive. But of the two, when it comes to the economy, I know what you're saying, yes, he sounds like he knows what he's talking about. But if he really is serious about the sound money stuff, that's really bad news if the predictions that we've heard today come to pass over the next 18 months.
I suppose that's interesting. I mean, from my perspective, sound money or deficit spending to fund tax cuts which disproportionately benefit the rich, I'm kind of indifferent between the two. I don't care. But I suppose what you're saying is if she's okay with deficit spending, then maybe the pressure that will come with a cost of living crisis will force her to shift that more away from tax cuts and more towards actual support for the people who need it. But obviously, not much faith in either, but I think that's a reasonable sort of summary of the difference between the candidates and what it could mean to have one or the other as Prime Minister. Aaron, let's
say this, Michael.
Sorry, go on.
I'd say there's one more thing, Michael. There's a big thing, which is foreign policy. And I think Liz Truss is a very much a loose cannon and a wild card. And I could see her getting into all sorts of scrapes. So I don't think that's the only difference. I think basically Sunak is an identikit politician who will basically toe what the State Department and the United States tell him to do. That's what most British prime ministers have done since the Second World War. I think there's a possibility Liz Truss could start to say stupid, belligerent things which are actually quite harmful for British interests. So I think that those to me are the big two differences. But I think you're right, Michael, that Sunak looks and sounds like he cares, even though he doesn't. And I think that's a big thing going into a general election. She doesn't. Although I do think she's improved over the last 3 months. I thought she was a walking, talking car crash 3 months ago. Now you see glimpses of her maybe being an interesting politician, at least.
I mean, she's better at, she's okay at sounding sort of like human and relatable. She just isn't on top of quite a lot of issues. But I suppose, everyone needs some time to learn, don't they? Just unfortunate she's about to become the Prime Minister. Let's wrap up there. Aaron, a pleasure watching. Well, it wasn't a debate, wasn't it? Watching those hustings with you, I suppose.
My pleasure, Michael. And for about 5 minutes, Liz Truss really looked like she was collapsing. Maybe she'll be like Theresa May. That was the first time where I thought, wow, she really is very weak in parts. So interesting few years ahead, Michael. Not in a good way, but still.
And thank you guys for watching that hustings with us as well. It does make it all much more bearable and entertaining to have your comments going along with whatever nonsense they're talking about. For now, you've been watching Novara Media. Good night.